FREENBECKY. Love that breathes, not performs. When love stops trying to be seen. In a world where love is constantly staged, documented, and measured by visibility, there is something quietly radical about a connection that simply exists. Not for applause. Not for confirmation. Not for performance. FREENBECKY feels like that kind of love. It doesn't rush toward the camera. It doesn't announce itself at every turn. It doesn't compete for attention. Breathe. And that difference, subtle as it may seem, is exactly why so many people feel it so deeply. The age of performance, and the rarity of presence. We live in an era where relationships are often expected to prove themselves. Proof looks like a constant public affirmation, visible milestones, strategic timing, curated intimacy. Love in this environment becomes something to manage rather than something to live. FREENBECKY disrupts that expectation not by refusing visibility altogether, but by refusing artifice. Their connection does not feel rehearsed. It does not feel sharpened for effect. It does not feel inflated to satisfy an audience. Feels present. And presence is increasingly rare. What it means for love to breathe. Breathing is unconscious. It is necessary. Happens even when no one is watching. Love that breathes. Has rhythm, not urgency. Allows pauses without panic. Doesn't collapse in silence. It doesn't disappear when attention shifts. This is the energy fans recognize in FREENBECKY. There is space in their connection. Space to rest. Space to grow. Space to not always be on. And that space is not emptiness, it's trust. The absence of strain is not an accident. One of the most striking things about FREENBECKY is how little strain appears between them. Not the strain of expectation. Not the strain of explanation. Not the strain of constant reassurance. That absence isn't luck. It's what happens when a connection isn't built on constant performance. When people don't have to act in love, they can actually be in it. Why fans feel calm instead of frenzied. Many celebrity pairings generate excitement. FREENBECKY generates calm. Fans often describe their presence as grounding, soothing, emotionally safe, steady. This reaction is telling. Excitement burns fast. Calm sustains. People return to FREENBECKY not for adrenaline, but for regulation. The same reason people return to music that feels like home or stories that don't exhaust them. Their connection doesn't spike emotions. Stabilizes them. Love without an audience still exists. One of the quiet assumptions of modern fandom is that intimacy loses value when it isn't shared. FREENBECKY challenges that assumption. Their bond suggests that intimacy does not evaporate in privacy. It often deepens there. Fans sense that what matters most between them isn't what's shown, but what's protected. That protection doesn't feel secretive. Feels intentional. And intention is the opposite of performance. Why this resonates so strongly with LGBTQ+ audiences. For LGBTQ+ people, love is often expected to be either invisible or a spectacular, either hidden quietly away, or displayed loudly as proof of existence. What's rarely allowed is love that is simply ordinary, steady, gentle, unremarkable in the best way. FREENBECKY represents that missing middle. Their connection isn't about making a statement. It's about making space. Space where queer affection doesn't need to justify itself. Space where care isn't politicized. Space where love can be soft without being dismissed. That is profoundly validating. Care is a language, not a gesture. Care, in performative relationships, often appears as big moments. In breathing love, care appears as consistency. Fans notice how attention shifts naturally toward the other. How emotional states are quietly respected. How timing adjusts instinctively. How comfort is prioritized over optics. These moments don't trend easily. They don't clip well. They don't scream significance. But they accumulate. And accumulation is how trust is built. Why their bond feels durable. Durability doesn't come from intensity. Comes from sustainability. A connection that requires constant emotional display burns fast. A connection that allows breathing, adapt, rest, recalibrates, continues. Fans sense that FREENBECKY's bond is built for longevity, not immediacy. And in a culture addicted to instant gratification, that longevity feels quietly extraordinary. Not everything meaningful is meant to be measured. Modern relationships are often evaluated by metrics: frequency, visibility, milestones, public confirmation. FREENBECKY resists measurement. Their connection doesn't offer clear data points, and that's exactly why it feels real. Real love doesn't always come with timestamps, doesn't always escalate on schedule. It doesn't always translate cleanly into language. Sometimes it just stays. Love that doesn't collapse under curiosity. Curiosity can be invasive. Many connections fracture under it, either overexposing themselves or retreating completely. FREENBECKY does neither. They acknowledge attention without reshaping themselves for it. They maintain presence without surrendering privacy. That balance is difficult, and maintaining it requires mutual respect, which fans can see. The courage to let love be simple. Simplicity is often mistaken for lack of depth, but simplicity, when chosen, is usually the result of clarity. FREENBECKY's love feels simple not because it lacks complexity, but because it has moved beyond confusion. They don't appear to be negotiating their bond in public. They appear to be living it privately. That simplicity reads as peace. Why breathing love feels safer than loud love. Loud love demands response. Breathing love invites presence. Fans don't feel pressured by FREENBECKY. They feel welcomed. There is no expectation to interpret every moment. No demand to decode every silence. No pressure to pick sides or choose narratives. To space. And in that space people settle. The subtle power of consistency. Consistency is unglamorous. It rarely goes viral. But it is the foundation of trust. FREENBECKY's consistency, in tone, behavior, care, creates a sense of reliability. People trust what repeats without force. That trust becomes attachment. Not obsessive attachment, but emotional loyalty. Conclusion. Love that stays alive because it can breathe. FREENBECKY represents a kind of love that doesn't exhaust itself trying to be believed. A love that inhales and exhales. That rests when needed. That moves without spectacle. That exists without explanation. Love that breathes doesn't disappear when the lights dim. And that is why, long after trends fade and performances end, people continue to feel drawn to them. Not because they demand attention, but because they offer something increasingly rare. A sense that love, when allowed to breathe, can actually last.